For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son, therefore behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel.
Hello, good day. Welcome to the Line by Line Bible Studies. We continue our study today in Zechariah. It's been kind of rocky with the scheduling. My schedule's about to even out, but not in a good way. I'm going to have to figure out when I'm going to be able to do this study. It's going to have to either be... One time I won't be able to do it is 2:30, so... I guess I need to say that when people are around. All right, let's start by reading. The burden of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach, and Damascus shall be the rest thereof, when the eyes of man, as of all the tribes of Israel, shall be toward the Lord. And Hamath also shall be a border that... and Hamath also shall border thereby, Tyrus and Zidon, though it be very wise. And Tyrus did build herself a stronghold, and heaped up silver as the dust, and fine gold as the mire of the street. Behold, the Lord will cast her out, and he will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured with fire. Ashkelon shall see it, and fear. Gaza also shall see it, and be very sorrowful. And Ekron, for her expectation, shall be ashamed. And the king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. And a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. And I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. And I will take away his blood out of his mouth, and his abominations from between his teeth. But he that remaineth, even he, shall be for our God. And he shall be as a governor in Judah, and Ekron as a Jebusite. And I will encamp about mine house because of the army, because of him that passeth by, and because of him that returneth. And no oppressor shall pass through them any more, for now have I seen with my eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just, and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the heathen, and his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, and from the river even to the ends of the earth. As for thee also, by the blood of thy covenant have I sent forth thy prisoners out of the pit wherein there is no water. Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double unto thee. When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bow with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as a sword of a mighty man. And the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning. And the Lord God shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with the whirlwinds of the south. And the Lord of hosts shall defend them, and they shall devour, and subdue with sling stones. And they shall drink, and make a noise as through wine. And they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar. And the Lord their God shall save them in that day, as the flock of his people, for they shall be as the stones of a crown, lifted up as an ensign upon his land. For how great is his goodness, how great is his beauty! Corn shall make the young men cheerful, and new wine the maids. And that's where they chose to break the chapter. Ask ye of the Lord rain in the time of the latter rain. Let's keep reading a little bit. So the Lord shall make bright clouds, and give them showers of rain, to every one grass in the field. For the idols have spoken vanity, And the diviners have seen a lie, and have told false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore they went their way as a flock. They were troubled, because there was no shepherd. Mine anger was kindled against the shepherds, and I punished the goats. For the Lord of hosts hath visited the flock of the house of Judah, and hath made them as his goodly horse in the battle. Out of him came forth the corner, out of him the nail, out of him the battle bow, out of him every oppressor together. And they shall be as mighty men, which tread down their enemies in the mire of the streets in the battle. And they shall fight, because the Lord is with them. And the riders on horses shall be confounded. And I will strengthen the house of Judah, and will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them again to place them, for I have mercy upon them. And they shall be as though I had not cast them off. For I am the Lord their God, and will hear them. And they of Ephraim shall be like a mighty man, and their heart shall rejoice as though through wine. Extra words. As through wine. Their children shall see it and be glad. Their heart shall rejoice in the Lord. I will hiss for them and gather them, for I have redeemed them, and they shall be increased as they have increased. And I will sow them among the people, and they shall remember me in far countries, and they shall live with their children and turn again. And I will bring them again also out of the land of Egypt, and gather them out of Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them. And he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart away. And I will strengthen them in the Lord, and they shall walk up and down in his name, saith the Lord. That's a good place to stop. This series of utterances seem to be interconnected, or they're unlike before where we had definitive visions separated by, at this particular time. A lot of it's cryptic. The burden of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach. Hadrach is a place that's never actually mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. It may be the same as a place in Genesis. According to I looked it up before the study. This is not off the top of my head. Because I was like, all right, what's that mean? It was, the Assyrian tablets refer to it. It's basically in the same neighborhood as Damascus and Hamath. Hamath and Damascus, they talk in the prophets that talk about the entering in at Hamath, because that's kind of where you enter into the Holy Land. Okay, I don't know. That was the only word that was coming into my mind. I was like, the Holy Land, right? Ancient Israel, but that's like the borderland, Hamath, and it's up there near Tyre and in Lebanon and stuff. And so that's what he's talking about. First of all, Damascus, that's Syria, but that's really close if you know your geography, right? Syria and Lebanon are border states with each other. And of course, Syria borders the state of Israel also, as in ancient times. And Damascus has a lot of history. The book of Isaiah tells of the history of the alliance between the king of Damascus and the king of Israel against Judah during the time of the civil war and such. So there's back and forth with that relationship. Tyre and Zidon, remember King Hiram of Tyre supplied timbers to Solomon to build the temple, but they were not always on friendly relations. So Tyre is a sometimes friend, but other times not so much. And of course, and so what is it saying here? First of all, the burden of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach, and Damascus shall be the rest thereof. That means the resting place. And that could mean in the land of Hadrach, when the word of the Lord comes on, they go to rest in Damascus because they have to flee. And that often is the case. You'll see there's a couple chapters in Isaiah where the prophets talk about people fleeing from different geographical locations. And so they refer to them. My old teacher used to try to interpret the meaning based on the name's place, what it means. Like Jerusalem's, city, means peaceful. I mean, peaceful habitation, Yerushalayim. I forgot the Yeru part was. Peaceful habitation is what I believe it means. And so he goes to these places, when the eyes of men as of all the tribes of Israel shall be toward the Lord. In the time when everyone's looking to God as Israel. And that's always in a very, I think of it as like in good times, people don't look to God in good times. That's in the Bible. It's like it says so. When it's good, when things are good, Israel, you don't call on me. When they were fat, they got, Yeshurun waxed fat and kicked. He got fat. When he talks about the nation of Israel getting fat, it means because plenty of everything. How do Americans get fat? Well, because they never stop feeding themselves. And that's why it's important as a Christian to continue to fast, because fasting is a natural state of man. We fast once in a while. We don't always eat. It's not, it's something Jesus practiced. We should all practice. Just like baptism. Do I have to be baptized to be saved? It's like, well, no, but Jesus was baptized, and and he said it in such a way that made me feel like, well, I should probably do that too. But I don't. But there are all kinds of baptisms. The thief on the cross, he wasn't baptized, but he was going through a baptism. Being crucified is a sort of a baptism in a way. That's why Jesus talked about it in that way. Can you be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? Can you, drink of this cup even? But he said, you will indeed, Peter, one day. But but not then. It's not easy. When you're young, you're impulsive. You think like, I remember when I was young, I was excited about the end times. I thought, oh, the end times, can't wait. And now I'm like, I hope we don't see the end times. I hope the Lord returns in 1,000 years, though it may not be possible. We may not be able to afford that. We can't afford another 1,000 years of human misdoings. We probably won't survive. Because I don't have a lot of confidence in humanity, I'll tell you that. Only confidence I have is in the Lord. But man looks to God when the times get tough. They turn towards God. Oh, God can save us from this. That's what I think immediately. Or after he returns, that's another time when they're all going to look to him. And also, the eyes of man, as of all the tribes of Israel, shall be toward the Lord. And of course, that means when people are looking to God, that's a metaphorical construction of the idea. When you look at something, you're paying attention to it. You're thinking about it. I'm looking at this right now. I'm thinking about it. My eyes are on it. And that's the idea. Toward the Lord, toward God, his commandments, what he wants of us, what he wants man to do. Well, there's a lot of commandments. It all boils down to something that's very simple. That we all kind of understand. Right and wrong, good and evil. Especially when it's done to us, we kind of figure it out. Oh, I didn't like that. Yeah, don't do things to other people you wouldn't want done to you. That's a real simple starter. But people won't do it. Rip each other off, screw each other over. Same thing. Hamath shall also border thereby Tyrus and Zidon, though it be very wise. Why is it invoked as wise? Well, Tyrus, wise. Why was Tyre wise? Well, they were built on a rock in the sea. And that would be something the Lord would always condemn. Building on a rock. I mean, not condemn, condone. And recommend. Build your foundations on a rock, right? You build on the rock, not on the sifting sand. That's what he says at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, of course, in chapter 7 of Matthew. You always build on the rock. So, the Tyre, they're wise. They built on a rock. But that doesn't mean they can't be brought down. And of course, as history demonstrated, eventually Alexander the Great was so angry with them for defying him that he built a land bridge out to them and brought them home to though they were founded on a rock, they were brought down from thence. Ezekiel also has a lot to say about the Prince of Tyre. That's one of my songs. A lament upon the Prince of Tyre. I remember people will say, well, Paul, I remember one time after studying a while, they were like, but don't you think this Prince of Tyre is just the Prince of Tyre? Why do you think that it's Satan? Well, I'm not saying it isn't the Prince of Tyre. I'm just saying that when princes get full of themselves, they start acting like the devil. And so then the prophets start talking about them as if they are the devil because it's accurate. And we learn about the devil by seeing how when men give themselves over to evil, how they become. That's why the Antichrist, there are many Antichrists in the world. There are many forces that are Antichrist, fake Christianity. Just as there is an Antichrist, ultimately, I believe. I mean, some people don't believe there is an Antichrist, but merely a spirit. That's a possibility, but I don't think that's the most likely one. But that's always an issue that people shouldn't divide over. Like what, we'll get to figure out Antichrist when we see him. What we got to mostly agree on is like the Lord, our faith in him, and quite frankly, our obedience to him. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not talking about people's salvation. I'm talking about, as a Christian, what marching orders as a teacher I should give other believers. Should I tell them they should obey, or it's okay not to? I'm gonna say, obey your father. It's not impacting whether or not you're a son, but it will impact your relationship. And the more obedient you are, the more confident you'll be. That's another thing, that when we can look at our lives and not feel like we have these glaring sins still on the books, still active in our lives. We all make mistakes, sure, but we don't all need to have a monkey on our back all the time. That's a burden we don't want to be carrying around, and it inhibits our walk. And but when we get rid of those things, and we don't have things just hanging over us, it's so freeing. And so Christians should be encouraged to stop sinning, because you'll feel better not being sinful all the time. And don't worry, you'll probably make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect, not yet. But someday, well, don't ever tell me you're never. Oh, I'm a Christian, but I'll never be perfect. Oh, don't say that. Unless you tell me you're a Christian, you're planning on going to hell. If I believed in such a place, but I do believe in the lake of fire, which will serve just as well. So Tyrus built herself a stronghold and heaped up silver as the dust and gold as the mire of the streets. Obviously those are hyperbole. Obviously, he didn't have gold like the mire of the streets, but that's the thing. There's sometimes hyperbole in the Bible. It's okay. But they had a lot of wealth, though. That's what they're saying. You had a lot of wealth in Tyre because they were a merchant maritime city. The merchant city. Yes. And that also, of course, harkens to Revelation. And in some ways, Tyre and Zidon, if you look at the scriptures about them in the Isaiah and also the other prophets like Ezekiel, who refer to them quite, and I think I have no doubt that Jeremiah has somewhat to say about them, not a whole lot. Whereas Daniel doesn't focus on a lot of play. He focuses on those. Well, he's shown beasts and stuff in a little different time too. But Tyre and Zidon are related to that merchant city. The merchants you see in Revelation make me think of Tyre and Zidon. Like in scriptures you see about Tyre and Zidon, the merchant city. And also it is a satanic stronghold because economics just are. Satan seeks to control all, he has, under the Lord, he has authority over many, many things in this world. He can't just do whatever he wants, but he has a lot of authority, at least according to the scriptures, right? According to what he said to Jesus, I can give these things to whoever I want, at least at that time. And it's always authority, because Satan's power is not innate. He has no real power of his own. He can only do what God allows him to do. Just like us, we can't do anything beyond what God's given us. The Lord will cast her out, will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured by fire. Eventually, yes, Alexander the Great did destroy Tyre, burned the city, and he went out into the sea to get them. Her power was in the sea, though, of course. And that's I think that didn't Isaiah specifically say that. The merchant city, how you ships of Tarshish. I have to go at this. The problem with making scripture songs is that you end up having to sing them to remember things. I should have spent more time. I should have thrown the numbers in. I once had a version of a couple of recordings where I actually would say the chords as I go by. I wonder if I could. I should have said the verse numbers, but that would be weird in the song. Why am I doing this the hard way? I just want Tyre and Isaiah. I don't know why I want that reference so bad, but yeah. Yeah, Isaiah 23. Especially when I look at Isaiah 23, I remember I was thinking, boy, this really makes me think of those merchants at the end of Revelation. The same kind of spirit. And that's not the thing. I'm not saying that's that or this is that, but it's like a comparison. And you understand, when you understand the one, you you can start understanding the other better too. So The crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth. Isn't this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Yeah. Tarshish. Yeah, because this is the burden of Tyre. And what does a burden mean? It's like, well, it's a prophetic burden. It's what God has said concerning a place. And it can mean something like doom, but it is, I wonder if it's the same word in Isaiah as in here, probably, but I didn't actually look at the word in Zechariah. What do you say? The burden of the word of the Lord. No, that's Zechariah 9. Oh, yeah, in the line of it. Here's Massa, which is, I'm not bringing it on screen, but let's see. Massa means, come on, buddy. All right. A burden, specifically tribute or abstractly porterage, figuratively an utterance. Porterage is something to carry, obviously, a burden. An utterance, chiefly a doom. I like it, especially singing. That's probably, wait a second. That's interesting because, see, with the definition there, utterance, a doom, singing. When Israel went to war against Palestine, against Gaza a couple of years ago, and after October 7th, I was praying about it, and I wrote a song called "The Burden of Israel." Thou shalt not commit genocide, and that's interesting. It's especially singing, because most of these burdens, we don't know if they were sung or how. It'd be interesting if they were sung. They would be interesting because mostly they're not the kind of singing we usually think of. Like I said, when I have songs singing about the fall of Babylon, it's not the kind of thing you sing when you praise the Lord, or you talk about, or songs about the law, or the Psalms have something like I think about Psalm 119. I love your statutes, teach me your testimonies, that kind of stuff. All right, it's a very different kind of thing than teach me your ways, O Lord. Then the Lord will whet his mighty sword and smite the heathen type stuff. All right, back to the text. So that's burden. Moving along. He will cast out, smite her power, devour with fire. Ashkelon will see it. Ashkelon, you're moving down the coast towards the Philistines. Up north, we have the Tyre, which is also basically they're all colonies of the Phoenicians from their period of dominance, and they're still around. The Phoenicians were very powerful seafaring people, and Tyre was one of the important cities. But they're all, the Phoenicians were not. I think there was a period when they were very strongly united, but then, over time, these are city-states separated by a lot of water, but they trade with each other, and they trade with, and that facilitates trading even further along the line, like to get tin from England, because they're needed for making bronze and stuff, and I think that's where a lot of the tin came from the Bronze Age tin. Well, actually, also Spain, I think they needed it, but you have to go all the way over to Spain. And that's quite a long way. On land, it's you got to either cross the coast of Africa, go around the coast, but they would sail. All right, so Ashkelon will see it and be in fear. Gaza shall see it and be very sorrowful. A lot of times when people see prophecies about land places, one of the things I think that's a mistake that people make is assume all the land prophecies apply through to the very end. I mean, whatever he says about Gaza is permanently about Gaza. Even though, there may not be a king. The king already, they don't have a king in Gaza. There's already no king there. That's ancient history. There's no king. No king in Gaza. And notice Gaza is not part of Israel. It's another people's city. And, Israel was not constantly at war with them and was never told by God to exterminate them. And the Palestinians aren't really supposed to be. They're probably a mixed descent they're basically mixed descendants of probably the Philistines, the Arabs, the Ishmaelites, all those people, the Edomites, all the people who were basically closely related to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and were not subject to any sort of thing like we're talking about when you're talking about things like it's not Absalom. Absalom was David's son. It's Abimelech. Not, is it Abimelech? No, not Abimelech. Oh, it's that the I know I'm drawing a blank on it, but Benjamin Netanyahu who said, "Oh, they're all Amalek." That's what it was, Amalek. So we've got to destroy the remnant of Amalek because Amalek was the evil guy there. The people that they were actually told to destroy. Okay, we don't play God though. It's one thing God tells people, okay, I want you to go do something pretty crazy, but you do it. Okay, I mean God's God, but I'm willing to accept that from God, but not from men. You know, when men say stuff like that, what? Because people say, like, well, you would do that if God said? It's like, people have done it because they were ordered to do by another person. They've done atrocities. They're doing them right now. You know, because, oh, that was just orders. I was told I got to do that, you know. It's not an excuse. Anyways, these people are not to be treated as the same as the people that created the grudges in the time of the prophets. The Philistines were an ancient enemy of Israel that they fought over many centuries. And so there's it's a lot to be said there. People talk about the Middle East. The Middle East, there hadn't been conflict in Palestine or about Palestine since the Crusades. As far as once the Ottomans took control, they had a particular way of sorting things out. The Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims each had a part of the city that goes back for hundreds of years. There's always been some Jews there, some Christians, and some Muslims, and they were getting along pretty much. They haven't been fighting for centuries because if we're pious, Islam will respect our religion. You know, if we're not, they won't. Or they don't have to, technically speaking. You know, they could regard us as, pagans, I suppose. A lot of us probably deserve it. A lot of Christians aren't much different than pagans. You know, that's a sad thing. You can't tell the difference, you know. I mean, it's like sometimes I'm surprised. I never want people to be surprised I'm a Christian. I never thought you'd be a Christian. I'm like, why? What was I doing? You know, it's like, no, they should be like, of course. They should be asking you questions like, there should be some reason that they see hope in you that goes beyond what normal people should have. And that's ideally how we should, shine as lights in the world. So people know we're Christians, but we're not, wearing on our sleeve. I've never been a big Lord's Gym type shirt wearing guy where it's like, or wear a big cross on me to sort of, while I don't think those are wrong, per se, it's like, it's definitely not my taste, to wear, I remember going to a Christian bookstore and they had like testaments and each little mint was wrapped with a little piece of paper with scriptures on it so you could read them and then throw them away. I mean, it's kind of, well, I guess this one more scripture while I ruin my health eating sugar. All right, so, for expectation should be ashamed, the king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. Expectation is another word for hope, actually. In the New Testament, the word hope is defined in the Strong's Concordance as expectation. And if you think about it, that's what it means. It means what you think is coming, what you think is going to happen, what you hope in is what faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, the things that like someday Jesus is going to return. That's my hope. My hope in it is the evidence of the faith. Oh, I'm sorry. Faith is or whatever. Anyways, so I was thinking overthinking that is way too unnecessary. As far as like, we hope in things we don't see. Otherwise, if we had it, why are we waiting for it? Why are we hoping? The hope is for anticipation. It's for the future. It's not for what we have or what we possess now. So, though sometimes we'll say, I hope things last, I hope this, but you're talking about they're still there in the future. It's always about future. So, a lot of times there is this talk about people's expectations being frustrated. In the New Testament, you think about what people thought Jesus would do. is like when Jesus came, when he, even to the point when he's ascending into heaven, they're saying, wilt thou at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Because they read this chapter and they saw him enter into the city on that colt, right? And he was humble and lowly, and now he rose from the dead, and so he's going to do the rest of it, right? The part about breaking the battle bow and taking that dominion and restoring the kingdom and all that stuff. How about that? And what was his response? He said, it is not for you to know the time or the seasons. Now, he didn't deny it. He didn't say there's never going to be a kingdom. Forget about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm never restoring the kingdom. And he said, you don't know the timing. And so that's one of those things. Without this time, restore the kingdom. Well, he should have said something like, no, don't you get it? There is no kingdom. No, there is a kingdom, I think. I think there's a kingdom now that we must build, and then there's a kingdom we're going to enter into. What exact form of it? Some people believe in a millennial type kingdom where 1,000 years and then an everlasting state, which is similar, or we just go right to the everlasting to some. That's more like a millennial position. And it's not essential that you come down on either side. There are other views too. Like there's the post-millennial view, which is we're supposed to usher in 1,000 years of Christian goodness, and then Jesus comes. And as long as I'm on the earth, I will live like a post-millennialist. That's how I do believe in living like a post-millennialist. Like we should be doing the work on earth to make the earth look as much like God's kingdom as possible through the teachings of Christ, not through other methods. I don't think, he meant for us to go around converting people at the end of a gun. But essentially a lot of Christian history, it's not quite that, but it's just about that. Especially in Europe, the way the whole kingdoms were converted at a time, which is not my idea of build a lot of strong foundations of faith in that, So, well, okay, yesterday we were worshiping Thor, now we're worshiping Jesus. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure that's going to be seamless. Right, it's a problem. It's a problem. Because when you come to faith as your own choice, it's so much stronger, and you're a different kind of Christian. It's like being a nominal Christian who's been a Christian just because it's their culture. I mean, Richard Dawkins, he's a cultural Christian. He likes Christmas music. He wants to maintain traditions. He probably don't even mind a nativity scene. But that's not real Christianity. He actually likes the real Christianity too, because he likes being a moral person for the most part. He's not really a moral person because there's a bit of fakery on that, and because it's the intellectual inconsistency. Go tear down something and then try to build it up at the same time. It doesn't work. It's called regret is what I think. I think they regret the damage they did to the faith. The faith is technically, I think we're on a re-upswing. There's a lot more people moving into the faith now. Wonderful, wonderful. I like people who are adults coming to faith. It's good that our faith grows through conversion as opposed to just through childbirth, because that's another way you can be born Christian. Now, if you're born Christian to a Christian who themselves has been converted inwardly, that's a very promising birth. But if you're born to a nominal Christian, you're most likely to end up nominal yourself. And that's what often happens to people. That's how my wife was. She was raised by nominal Christians, and so she was nominally Christian. I was raised by half and half. And so I was kind of weird like that. And also my father did not really understand. And so, I was, like most people, I was led, I think, to sin because it seemed like sin didn't matter. Jesus paid for all of it. And so who cares? You're forgiven. Just believe in Jesus. And now you're forgiven. Isn't that wonderful? Just keep believing that story and you're okay. It's like, but what if I'm not okay? Like with a life that's full of sin and stuff that I don't like, but I feel bound to do for some reason because because whatever, I'm a broken human being. It's like, what if I don't like being a broken human? What if I want to be healed? There's nothing for me in Jesus with that. Oh yeah, there's healing. Well, why aren't you offering that? And so it wasn't entirely. He was very much taught, the Christianity of the times, which was, hey, put your faith in Jesus. And it's true. Put your faith in Jesus. I'm glad he didn't think that was, he wasn't so dogmatic that he then tried to live that way. He tried to do things that he thought were good works, not to earn his salvation, but because he was on the team, and good. That's what we should all be like. We're not to insult Christ trying to earn salvation, which none of us are trying to do. We all know. Or at least some of us do. Some people are trying to earn salvation, and I don't know. I think if you're trying to earn salvation, if you do a good job, I don't see why Jesus is going to be so resentful at the throne of your attempts. But he's going to be like, forget it. You didn't believe in my story. Well, we'll see what happens. Okay, I'll let the judge judge. So I wouldn't advise anyone to tempt Christ, and I would advise everyone to put their faith in him and start following him now, because it's a lot better to have all your sins go before you to judgment than to come to judgment and have it all right there behind you. It's like you want to get things sorted out ahead of time. That's what Christianity does for you. Your judgment you pass from judgment to life. But we've got to live that life. If you don't want to live like you're alive, then we're not really Christian, because Christians are to have life and more abundantly life. I am not come, to take away all. They're going to have it more abundantly. That's why I said, hey, you've abandoned houses and things for my sake. But you know what? Not only in the kingdom to come, but in this present world, he said in Luke, you're going to have houses and brothers and sisters and such, and family and stuff. Because he was saying, when you're leaving behind ungodliness, you lose something, but you're going to gain so much more on the godly end of the ledger. And you do. You can have a lot of blessings in the world. I mean, as long as you're a content person. I mean, not to be rich, but just like I said, I have 8 kids, daughter and 7 sons. I feel very blessed. People call me blessed, and that's why I want that. I want people to think of me blessed, because I'm also a servant of the Lord, and therefore there should be some mark of blessing. I don't have to be rich. Why? So people can envy me? So people can judge the fact that I don't maybe give away as much as I should? I spend too much money on myself. Put that in the swimming pool I always wanted. An in-ground swimming pool instead of the above-ground trailer park one I got that we put away every year, actually. That's the kind of, it's the kind of show I run. We put our pool away. We don't leave it out all year. I don't know if that matters. To some people, to me, that matters. Above-ground pools, they can be a mess. Rejoice greatly. I like it because I always think maybe somebody will want to be baptized. So I like to keep that pool open all summer. All right. This year we actually had it out till this last week. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Wait. I will encamp my house because of the army, because of him. Wait. Yeah. I will take away the blood out of his mouth. Okay, yeah, there's the Philistines. The Philistines. So let's see, Philistines. Moving on from Tyre, the merchants suffering. Philistines always kind of make me think of what would they represent? Well, sort of like they're this ungodly people. They're right there, but they're strangers. They're neighbors, but they're not right with God. They worship false gods. And they're kind of the enemies of God's people. They're proud. Ashdod is one of their cities, one of their chief cities. I think it might be, I'm not sure if that was their chief city, but it's one of their chief cities. So his blood out of his mouth. What does that mean? Well, they drink blood as part of their rituals. And that's why in the New Testament that was one of the things they forbid. When they were saying, well, what are they? When they want to know out of the law of Moses, what parts do they have to take heed to? And they said, well, I think besides the obvious of I don't think they thought they had to tell people, well, don't kill. They didn't need to do that. They said, blood drinking. No drinking blood. No eating things sacrificed to idols. Fornication, and things strangled. And and it's an interesting collection. Now, the drinking blood is mostly part of pagan rituals, because I think it goes along with the. Not that I think you should drink blood. Okay, I don't advise anyone drink blood. It's not a good thing to drink. You know what I mean? I don't worry about a little bit of redness in my red meat. That's not drinking blood. You know what I mean? It's not the same. Some people insist on like really kosher meat where they drain the blood very thoroughly, I guess. I don't know. But I think blood drinking is a little demented. And when people start getting into rituals where they're involving drinking blood and then also killing animals in weird ways, because I always look at all those four things as related to pagan. What do the Gentiles do that grosses out the Jews? Well, they're a bunch of fornicators. They drink blood. They eat things sacrificed to idols, and they eat strangled animals. And I don't know if the strangled animal goes back to something ritualistic, because we don't generally do that. We bleed all our animals that I know of. And so it's an interesting thing for them to tell the Gentiles not to do. So, or that those are the things they didn't want to burden them with the whole law. So like, hey, this abstain from fornication. But there's a lot of other things. I mean, what about adultery and killing? Why did they not mention that? I think it's because they thought, what makes the Gentiles distinctively unclean in our sight, and what behaviors do they need to stop? They don't have to wear tassels on their garments. They don't have to, dress like a Jew. They don't have to go up to Jerusalem because obviously the sacrificial system isn't going to be in play in Christianity. So all that stuff becomes a symbolic image of Christ from the Old Testament. But anyways, so taking the blood out of his mouth, the abominations from between his teeth. But he that remaineth, even he shall be for our God. And again, it's another forward-looking thing. Just like there's a passage in Isaiah that talks about, I will call them Assyria my people. Because God means to be reconciled with them, and ultimately that happened. I know a couple of Syrians. One in particular is a friend of mine. He's online. I guess he's a semi-famous apologist. He's a friend of mine, Sam Shamoun, and anyways, he's an Assyrian. So but they're all Christians. But they converted not by the end of the sword. When the apostles came to Assyria to preach the gospel in the first century, the Assyrians received it. So because it was also prophesied that they would become one of God's people. So, anyways, but the Philistines, I don't watch. I know I can see what you're saying. I'm friends with him. You know what I mean? I've advised him personally and stuff. And as an apologist, I haven't really watched him a lot because he focuses on Muslims. And he's really got a lot of beefs with them. And I don't really have a lot of beef with Muslims. I don't know Islam much. I've met actual Muslims, like civilians, nominal Muslims. They're fine people. They're just like our nominal Christian people, a lot of them. Most of them are just hardworking people that want to get by. They don't want to be terrorists or anything, and they certainly don't want to, convert Christians at the edge of the sword or anything like that. They're just not interested in that. They're interested in their lives. Most people, and even many of them who are devout. They're so smart that the smartness makes them ignorant, arrogant, and think they know it all. They also have a lot to learn. Yeah. No, I know. I find it difficult to watch a lot of Sam's debates because there's a lot of... They're very... he gets very... Here I'm talking about a live stream, but I usually don't. No, but he's... I don't like that kind of adversarial debate because it becomes adversarial. It's guaranteed to be... it's not a dialogue where we try to get along. Because it's like... That's not the point. And, it's touchy between Christians and Muslims, because they got a strong religion, Sam does know a lot of stuff. I'm not gonna say, I haven't asked him if he has the Holy Spirit. Unless I mostly talked, my conversations with Sam were mostly personal. And just because I was trying to help him out. And like I said, he's a friend of mine. And he convinced me on the Trinity. He was the one who got me to stop believe. I was always kind of close to being Trinitarian, but I denied it openly, and I had certain reasons. It was mostly because I just didn't like the whole idea of the inserting this new word and all that stuff. But really, it's a phenomenon everyone who struggles with the Bible comes across, and this notion of the oneness of God, and also the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit paradox, where they have interesting qualities, where they interact with one another as if they are distinct persons. And we use that word persons very specifically in the Trinity. So I educated myself a lot more after that, because he got me at a certain point. I think it was a point where I was trying to say, like, you never really, whenever you see God, it's only Jesus. You don't see the Father. But then he pointed out the scene at the throne, both in Daniel and in Revelation. And I remember he was actually, when we debated, I disarmed him so quickly. I think that's why we became friends, because I am a very understanding person, and you can talk to me, and I can be taught. And so when he gave his evidence for the Trinity, I was like, all right, because he was so defensive, and he was like so ready to be, he thought I was going to jump at him and be insulting and stuff like that. And he wasn't insulting or anything to me, but he was just I could tell he was very on guard. And the funny thing is, for me, the profile picture he had was of his daughter. And I thought this like 20-something girl was freaking whipping my ass, in a debate. And I thought it was funny. I'm like, this girl knows her stuff, and she's kicking my butt in this little text debate we were having. It was on Facebook. And I'm like, stop, that's enough. Because he was going on and on. I'm like, it's enough. He said, okay, it's enough. I'm like, because I think he thought, I don't know what he thought at that point. I'm like, you convinced me. And he was, I don't think he's ever been happier in his life, maybe, except for maybe some other time maybe spending some time with his daughters and stuff. But, yeah. And it's good, right? Sure. Sam's working on himself. We're all working on, we all need to be a little bit more like Jesus. We all could be a little bit more like Jesus. That's why I try to, you see my way. I don't like to engage in adversarial debate. I will debate a subject if I sincerely disagree on it. And especially if I think it's a truly important topic. I'll tend to be more likely to get passionate about it. But I always try to save my passion for the important things. Because honestly, like I said, it's like, I believe in the Trinity, but I don't think that being able to explain it or truly grasp it is actually a key to your salvation. It's just really not. I don't think, it's like, you can be a Down syndrome person and Jesus loves you and you're going to be saved when you put your faith in him. And we're going to teach you how that works. Okay. That's my Christianity. It's not for just the best and the brightest. It's for everyone on down to the least among us. That's how it has to be. If our mindset isn't in that, it's like, my mindset is like, I have to think of them. What if I was deceived? How could someone possibly convince me? Would they convince me by insulting me and by being, gotcha? And I'm not saying that's how Sam operates. Like I said, I haven't watched a lot of his debates, so I don't know. I tend to sit in on a couple of his live streams where he was talking to some of his people who support him and stuff, And so I tend to not like debates. I tend to not like seeing people get discomforted. Also, I don't like seeing people get embarrassed or humiliated. I don't like to come up with fancy names for things, but I know I have a very strongly empathetic streak, and I don't really enjoy it. Because when I feel other people's emotions too much, and I don't like it. Because I'd rather have a heart. It's probably good for my Christianity and all that stuff, and for my conscience sake. But sometimes it's hard. Not that I think I'm special in that way. I mean, just of people who can feel, I'm one of them. There's lots of us who can feel other people's feelings. But sometimes I'd rather not. And And so when I watch debates, and even if I'm against the person, when I see them, like, whenever I see a video like, watch someone get totally owned, and it's like, I don't care if it's someone I hate. I don't like watching it. I'm not a big revenge guy. Though sometimes, I ain't going to say I never have fantasies, especially about the people who screw me over. Sometimes I want revenge, not commensurate with what they've done. Nothing like over the top. I have to trust the Lord. I certainly know I should not take it into my own hands. It's good to have a lot of knowledge, but love is better. Love, the knowledge of how to love someone when we don't have that knowledge. How to love one another. How to be kind. How to persuade. In meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves. This person's got a problem with their doctrine. I'm going to meekly instruct them. That means I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to pull that sword out and just slice them to pieces. Like maybe I could. I learned that years ago when I started in 2007, speaking out against my original teacher, Arnold Murray, who Sam also studied with for a period also, which is interesting in his youth. It's funny because he has done a lot more of the get those facts known stuff, whereas I'm more of an explorer in the spirit and try to find out. I want to be a servant that looks like my Lord. And so when I was debating people on my website, they would insult me, and I'd insult them back. But then, because it was email, I didn't send it right away. I'd think about it, and I'd be like, you know what? I shouldn't do that. Not railing for railing. It's like you shouldn't do that. I know the Lord would not. That's not how the Lord said we should be. Yeah. Well, and also it's like sometimes your enemy. Because, that's the true story of the Good Samaritan that a lot of people miss. Is remember, the Jews hated the Samaritans. And the man, when Jesus is telling that story, you got to remember, all the apostles are Jews. All the people listening are Jews. And when the rabbi walks by and a Levite walks by and a Pharisee walks by, all these, the man who's injured is a Jew. So when the Samaritan helps him, he's helping someone who hates him. The Good Samaritan is a story about helping your enemies that spit on you and hate you. It's about helping your worst enemies. That's what it's about. That's who your neighbor is. That's the person who you treat with, who the Lord might ask about. How'd you treat these Muslims? It's like, what do you think? They're subhuman just because they don't know me? Just because they had some time ago, there was a war and their entire village was converted to Islam without a choice? You're gonna treat them like trash? The brothers were the enemy of Joseph too, right? He wanted to know if his brothers had changed and wanted to know how the 12 treated the youngest Benjamin, right? Right. It's important. People do really terrible things to each other. And outside the immediacy of passion, whatever, I'm capable of things. I'm not going to say I'm incapable. I'm capable of things for sure. Especially in passion. Like I said, I give the example. You walk in, someone's trying to, molest your kids or your wife or something. And how do you react? Probably physically. Probably not going to be like, I'm probably going to lose my control. And even though I should physically stop it. I think that's just, right? I don't say you do nothing, but you don't necessarily take the guy's head and put it into a meat grinder or something. You know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily take the law in your own hand and become judge, jury, and executioner. The newest kid on the block, the newest church on the block. The brothers can be broken down. The Protestant branch from Baptist, the Methodist, and the Evangelical, so forth. Each one saw the other as a cult. That is true. All the denominations, they disagree. The likelihood that any of them are right is pretty much nil. It's pretty much nil. They were right about some things, but the likelihood that anyone's right about everything is pretty much zero. Like I don't think even the best church is going to. The Lord hasn't revealed everything to me. Yeah, and that's the thing is sometimes we do find new things. Things come up, that are a new understanding, a different angle on it. Because they were so focused maybe on something corrupt from the past. Like Luther with his big, he talked about indulgences. He had his 95 Theses. But they were mostly complaints. Oh, it should be more like this. But Lutheranism is not that different than Catholicism. It's especially compared to, like, say, you go to a Pentecostal church. You're going to find a very different kind of place. And it's funny because then, and for them, they all have different taboos. For some people, like, stained glass is evil. I don't know. I always thought it was kind of cool. The one thing I always say about Catholic churches is, like, it does the aesthetic of holy pretty good. As far as you definitely feel like you're in a special place and it's all about Jesus. I've become more tolerant as the years go on of, like I said, of all other people's religions, because, like I said, I personally haven't been able to found a perfect church. I mean, found my own church that was perfect. And even when I do found my own church, which I'm planning on doing, sort of, because I tried going to churches and that's not working. And so I'm like, I'll just do my own and do it my own way. But, everyone's correcting the past and all that. And then they want to set it in stone. They want to make it so then it's like, okay, now we get it. This is the right way. And then every pastor in that denomination is now stuck. If he discovers, like, wait a second, could we drop this rapture thing? Nope, rapture's part of our doctrine. You don't get any discussion on that. Could we talk about maybe what if there is no, you don't talk about what if there's no rapture. No, I mean, it's such a consequential doctrine. The rapture is a pretty consequential doctrine. I don't think believing in it makes someone unsaved, by the way, of course, but Joseph had the gift of prophecy above all the other gifts. Bring the flock back to prophecy. Yeah, well, they don't believe in that. And they don't believe in prophets, let me tell you. They don't. Oh, I've seen false prophets. I met a few. It was amusing to me, of course, because they don't even know what prophecy is. They couldn't speak for God if he had his hand up the back of their neck and move their mouth for them. They were soothsayers. Oh, I see writing around you. You're not a prophet. You're a soothsayer. You're a fortune teller. That's not prophecy. Prophecy is telling people what God is saying right now. This is what the Lord says. This is what people should be doing. This is what you should be paying attention to. This is what, and there isn't that. No, we don't have that. No. Because they don't want to hear it. As always. The prophets are heard after the fact. The prophets, everyone ignores the prophets till they're overwhelmed by the Babylonians, and all of a sudden, like, wait a second, wasn't there someone that was warning us about all this? Wasn't there someone that said? When they go back to figure out, why did this happen? Why did God let this happen to us? Oh, we didn't give heed to his words. The burden of the word of the Lord. You got to give heed to it. That's the burden of faith, too. You can't just say you believe stuff and not have it affect what you do. Especially something as consequential as the story of Jesus. Church with correct interpretation of prophecy not make up future, but explain what has already been revealed. Well, sure. You'd like to think that, and you should. I don't know why anyone would stay in a church they thought was teaching falsely. Unless you were there to try to help, right? Now, as soon as you start, everyone teaches things they believe are true. Well, not everyone, right? There are people out there who don't believe any of it, but they preach it. Most teachers who are serious, though, do believe the things they seriously teach. I think a lot of them don't, and I think the prevalence of the rapture, because it is a consequential doctrine, it is not without harm. It is consequential. It is going to have an effect. It's like, and it is irresponsible for people to not consider the effect of these things down the line. Like, what's going to happen when there is no rapture? And then the false Christ appears. And what happens to Christian credibility and biblical credibility? You think people are going to be turning to the Bible Well, the Bible said there'd be a rapture. What's the point? I'd rather listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. He's here. The Bible is dusty in some corner. So I say the idea of tribulation states is absurd. Like some slacker is going to suddenly pick up the Bible at the beginning of the tribulation and be able to make sense of it. Yeah, with the Lord's help, absolutely. But that isn't how God usually works. He doesn't pull out his best troops right before after he prepared them for all these years. He polished us like polished shafts in his quiver, getting us ready to face down Antichrist and to do battle in the day of the Lord. And then he pulls us. I'd be so ticked off. I hated it. When I was a teenager, I believed in the rapture, by the way, and I hated it. I hated it. I didn't want to go. I said, Lord, don't take me. I thought it was the truth. I remember I was so relieved when I found my first teacher that he was like, he didn't believe it. And then he showed me the scriptures that made it, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It's basically right there. There's plenty of other evidence. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. The book of Revelation. Of course, there they try to pull all kinds of weird tricks. Like look, come up hither. That means there was a rapture. Nope. Sorry. That's really off the topic, I guess, but whatever. It's prophecy. The abominations between his teeth. But I was saying Philistines, heathen, that's kind of like us. America. We got abominations between our teeth and we got blood in our mouth. Maybe not from maybe not from literal sacrifices, but we got a lot of blood on our hands. We're funding a genocide, supporting it materially, and hey, that's as long as we stay on top, that'll be fine. That's a plan. Just dominate everyone forever. That's a great plan. I'm sure how's that working for you, Washington? How are those wars of domination working out? We keep failing. We keep losing because war is a losing proposition. It is not benefiting us. It's benefiting the contractors who supply the weapons, and that's it. And then some people work for those. They could have other jobs. They could manufacture refrigerators, something else. So he that remaineth shall be for our God. He shall be as a governor in Judah. Okay, that makes more sense. I didn't see that as before. Because why would a Philistine be a governor in Judah? Oh, well, meaning the heathen that are the Lord's are going to be, as my old teacher used to talk about the kings and queens of the ethnos. But the Old Testament does talk about these kings and queens of the nations, leading their nations to God and to the God of Judah and the God of Israel. And the idea that those people would be blessed like the rulers of God's own people. And so that's what it's saying. The ones who are left are going to be exceedingly blessed. They'll be for our God, ultimately. So the Philistines are not ultimately, the ones that are left, the remaining ones, are not an Ekron as a Jebusite. Now that's an interesting thing. The Jebusites were the original inhabitants of Jerusalem. And so does he mean that in a positive way? Like Ekron will be as a Jebusite, as this Philistine city will become like inhabited by the inhabitants of Jerusalem, but not the inhabitants of Jerusalem? I mean the old heathen inhabitants of Jerusalem? Something like that. I will camp about mine house because of the army, actual Jerusalem, because of him that passeth by and because of him that returneth. And no oppressor shall pass through them any more, for now I have seen with mine eyes. Seen what? Well, I suppose then that line connects it to the next part, because I think it's saying this prophecy is a vision of the deep future, perhaps. Especially when he starts getting to these very superlative things. And also not immediately couching it in conditional language. When there's no conditional language, oftentimes it's looking into the deep future. That's the way I look at it. Or especially into the deep future, because a lot of these things didn't happen in history. No oppressor passing through anymore. There's still oppressors in the land. Okay, so this is a prophecy that probably for a period was fulfilled, until they disobeyed again and that. But God doesn't intend for this cycle of blessing followed by disobedience and cursing, essentially, or the curse taking hold, basically, because the curse comes at the beginning with the blessing. Unfortunately, the blessing and the cursing kind of come hand in hand. You take the blessing at the cost of the cursing. It's like, well, you want to be God's people, right? Well, then you got to be this, just like being a Christian. What did Paul say? It would be better for them, not Paul, actually. It's actually in, isn't it in Peter? Yeah. It would be better for them not to have known the way of truth than to, after having known it, the way of righteousness, to turn away from it. It was better to not ever know it than to have done that. So, for now I've seen with my eyes, what did he see? Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon the colt, the foal of an ass. Of course, that's Christ entering in Jerusalem. So we see this has become messianic. He encamps about it because of the army of the enemy, presumably, because of the ones passing by. He needs to protect this thing. Ultimately, he has to protect it. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass. He is not proud. He is not dealing out justice with a sword, but coming in that very lowly fashion. And this is a great example of how prophecy can be really strange, because Jesus, just like when Jesus was quoting from Isaiah, I believe it was 61, when he said, he closed the book and said, "This day is this fulfilled in your ears." Well, the next verse was talking about things like, violence and him coming. He's saying, the meek and all this stuff. And then he says, he closes the book and says, "This day it's fulfilled in your ears." But he left out the part about, he stopped in the middle of a verse in that case. Here it's separated by two verses, or it's two separate verses. But one is speaking of events which were fulfilled in Jesus' lifetime. Another one speaks of events that did not happen in Jesus' life, but are yet waiting. Cutting off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the heathen, and his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, from the river even to the ends of the earth. It's a worldwide dominion. As for thee also, by the blood of thy covenant have I set forth thy prisoners out of the pit wherein there is no water. See, that's what Christ did. He had done that by the blood of the covenant. I don't know if that's also, it could be referring to the cutting off of the old blood out of their mouth, and because there's a thing where he's saying the heathen and Israel all are going to be blessed by the Lord. And in this way, when he takes this full dominion. And that's when the true freedom comes, is when the Lord returns. I mean, that's when we know we will have ultimate peace. We will have put on our new bodies. We will have everlasting life, and then we're going to find out what comes next. I have ideas. Other people have ideas. But those are things we can have fun debates about. We shouldn't take it personal. Especially stuff like that. Let's not take it personal. Let's not invest ourselves so heavily in our own ideas, because a lot of it is somewhat sketchy. It's like the sketch is set forth. What exactly is coming? Who knows? So turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. What is a stronghold? To me, that's the Lord. That's what he's saying. Not, they're going to build up the city, but who is the ultimate stronghold? It is the Lord. He is the stronghold we flee to, where we're supposed to look to. Ye prisoners of hope. The prisoners out of the pit wherein there's no water. Prisoners of hope is an interesting idea there, and I'm not sure how to interpret it, because there's different ways you could talk about that, right? In fact, let's look at the NIV to see how they interpret it, because I bet they interpret it. Because prisoners of hope sounds like almost like a hopeful thing. Like I'm imprisoned by hope. Or am I a hopeful prisoner? That's what I'm trying to get at. So let's see. I know we got to wrap it up here. We're over an hour. That's all right. I said my wife's starting a new job in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure where my schedule is going to be. I might have to move the study into the evening or later in the afternoon, but that's problematic because the wrestling season's coming and I coach wrestling 2 days a week. I don't know. I have to figure it out. Or it'll have to be earlier. Then my wife can't watch, but then she'll catch it. She might be able to listen. It might have to be earlier, like noon. All right, let's see. I don't know. So I may have an option. So if it means something to you either way, you might mention later or earlier, because it'll be one or the other. I'm not sure. And I might have to. I was thinking about it because the way it's going. But the one nice thing is it will regulate the schedule out, especially at the middle of my day is going to become very regular. So all right, let's see. How far do we have for this chapter? Because I don't want to belabor. I don't want to rush through the end of it. This is quite a bit. And the next chapter is kind of short. Let's figure out this last thought, and then we'll move on. When I bent Judah for me, fill the bow with Ephraim, raise up thy sons of Zion against thy sons of Greece, and the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as lightning. Okay, yeah. So, I just want to look at the NIV interpretation of this, and we'll probably pick up at the same place tomorrow, because it's sort of like, this is where it will, you prisoners of hope. All right, now where's my NIV? NIV. Oh, there it is. Bring it up on your screen. On the screen. All right. The burden of the... Okay. That's too far. Oh, there we go. You prisoners... Wow, that's still the King James. I thought I clicked that. I guess I didn't. All right, there we go. That looks more like it. So what do they... Why is it not up there? Okay. Oh, that's Bible collection. There we go. No wonder I had the wrong one. All right. Prisoners of hope. Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. Okay. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I will free your prisoners from... Looks like they went along pretty much... The King James is pretty solid here. No problems. Okay. Well... there we go. Yeah, because, well, I was about to go on a tangent. We want to wrap it up. All right, so by the blood kind sent forth thy prisoners out of the pit when there is no water. That sounds like a reference to the Lord himself again. He has freed us from the waterless pit. He made us to have a well of water in us, springing up into everlasting life. He gives us that water we drink of, whereby we never thirst again. And truly, our souls, prior to Christ, are in a pit that is waterless. Truly. So I think that's got to be the tightest thing I can think of. That's messianic. Turn you to the stronghold, because there's no animal sacrifice does any of this for anybody. Okay, right? Turn you to the strongholds, you prisoners of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double to thee when I have bent Judah. Okay, so we're going to go into that rest of that. Yeah, we're going to say we're actually going to pick it up at 12, because that technically, I don't know. I can't start after a semicolon. That just seems wrong. I have to start at the beginning of a sentence. So turn to the strongholds, you prisoners of hope. That's us. We're supposed to turn to God. We're held captive by the hope that he's put in us. And that's true, too. I literally feel like that. I can't quit God. There have been times where I wanted to quit, believe me. Because just, you follow the Lord long enough, he puts you through tests and hard things. And it's my own fault, because I was so aspirational. I want big things. I want high office, and I want to be a prophet. But you can't just do that on your own. You can't just ordain yourself. I'd like to be an apostle, but I go around calling myself names. That's not what people do. That's not how you obtain those things. Those things are not obtained. They're given to those whom the Lord has prepared when they're needed. The gifts of God are always, make room for themselves when the time comes. He sends his prophets early, and the word goes out. So, anyways, next time we'll continue. Until then, remember the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and he's the fulfillment of the law. I think this week, I've had a lot of things come off of my table. Things are sliding off before they go crazy, but I think this week will be good. Every time I say that, it's not true, though. But it's true. In my heart, I believe it, even if it doesn't work out. So anyways, it's a hard time here because winter is coming on fast. I live in a cold area, and I am really trying to get some stuff done as far as around the house to prepare for that. So see you next time. There's a little music.
For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son, therefore behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks, and he shall pass through Judah. He shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. For as much as this people refuseth the waters of Shiloah, that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah's son, therefore behold, the Lord bringeth upon them the waters of the river, strong and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory. He shall come up over all his channels,